Thank you for joining us. Our guest today is Winston Zahra Jr., and I wanted to ask Winston to join us for a number of reasons, but one of them is that they handed over their hotels to the NHS in the UK to help house the health workers during COVID, and I thought that was admirable and a real example of the type of leadership that we need. So we're going to be discussing what made him do that and what the future looks like for the hospitality industry post-COVID. Winston, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Deborah.
Just to give some context to our viewers and our audience, could you give us a little bit of background as to who you are, what you do, and then we can get into the heart of the conversation.
Yeah, so my name is Winston. I find it amusing how I'm still junior at 50, Deborah. I've kind of dropped that. I've been in the hospitality industry pretty much most of my life, and after we sold our family company in 2015, I eventually decided to join GG Hospitality in the UK, which is a company owned by Singapore businessman Peter Lim and class of 92 footballers Gary Neville, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Nicky Butt and Phil Neville. So we've been working together in Manchester for the last couple of years to grow the business there. We have two hotels, Hotel Football, which is opposite the Old Trafford Stadium, Manchester United Stadium, and recently the Stock Exchange Hotel, which is in the centre of Manchester. Together with the shareholders, with Peter Lim and Gary and Ryan and the rest, we decided we wanted to do something which supported the community when COVID broke out. And the best way we could think of doing that was housing healthcare professionals, NHS doctors and nurses who needed to isolate from their families during this time. We felt it was the right thing to do, and we just went ahead and did it.
I mean, that's admirable at the best of times, but even more so because, relatively speaking, you are a startup.
Yeah, it is pretty much a startup business. I mean, the stock exchange only opened on the 15th of November last year, 2019. So it wasn't an easy decision financially, and we had to put the resources together quite quickly to be able to do that. But in turn, we've also had, apart from immense shareholder support and everyone being on board with this, this is not me, it's everyone in the company. It's the shareholders, it's the volunteers from the team of staff that are looking after the NHS workers on a daily basis. You know, it's a collective thing. But it's also become collective from a community perspective, with lots of support coming in from companies in Manchester, individuals in Manchester, companies providing food, toiletries, clothing, all sorts of support coming in on a daily basis, right down to individuals anonymously dropping hampers on the doorstep of the hotel and just leaving stuff there for the NHS workers. So it's really been immensely gratifying, I would say, to be able to be in a position to support, but also to see the wide-ranging support that has come for the NHS through the hotels from the wider community.
Phenomenal. It's such a beautiful story. I think it's one of the, looking at how the crisis brings out the best of humanity is always great. There's the other side too, but I'd rather focus on the good side for right now. I'm just curious actually about your partners and the shareholders. You made reference to having to make the decision very quickly and having to pull resources very quickly. How important is it to have aligned partners, not only in business, but when you have to deal with a crisis situation?
To me, it's crucial at any point in time. I find that obviously in good times, it's easier if values aren't aligned to sort of close an eye and move forward and kind of navigate your way through. In tougher times, and especially times like this, which are, we are in uncharted waters, let's face it, alignment of values is absolutely key. And I think the fact that you could sit down with like-minded people who have very similar value sets and a desire to do things in the right way, the best way possible, makes all the difference. I have been in situations in my career where I have had to, or found myself in positions where I found that my set of values was not the same as someone I was in partnership with, and that is very difficult. And I'm not saying mine are the right set and the other person's are the wrong set. We just have different sets, and if they don't converge or are very closely parallel, then it does get very difficult. Luckily, in this case, I found that we're perfectly aligned. We immediately wanted to do the same thing. There was really no discussion about it. It was like, should we do it? Yes, bang, implement, get on with it. And yeah, sort it out as we go along, more or less, because the decision was more important than the process. We weren't getting lost in, let's figure this out, and what if this happens, and what if that happens. It was, let's do it, let's move fast, and let's implement.
I'd love to unpack that one more, but I think we'll leave that for times, because there's volumes behind that. What is your take on the hospitality industry going forward, both for your businesses or your hotels, but also from, I don't know if you can give us a view, for instance, from a Maltese environment perspective, since tourism is such a fundamental pillar of the economy. What do you see happening going forward?
Look, I'm divested from Malta at the moment, so I'm not sort of closely involved in the industry. But obviously, I partook in the industry locally for over 25 years, so I'm fairly familiar with the dynamics. The reality is Malta's an island, 3 million tourists per year at sort of last annual count, which compared to a 450,000 population is massive. 3 billion generated into the economy directly, much more than that, obviously, when you take the multiplier effect into account. And now the airport is closed, so no tourists can come here. All the hotels are closed, all the restaurants are closed, like many other places in the world. The only difference here is that we can't really rely on domestic tourism. So if I take Manchester, where I'm operating at the moment, over 80% of the business into Manchester is domestic UK business. So technically, if the airports don't open to international, Manchester will be affected, but not massively, not dramatically. In Malta, domestic tourism is negligible, and we can't expect hotels and restaurants to rely solely on domestic tourism and survive. I don't think that is a realistic option. There will be some, and obviously Maltese not going abroad will choose to potentially take a holiday in Malta unless they're safeguarding their cash because of all the uncertainty, because that's the other factor in this. But I think the industry is in for a tough ride, possibly the toughest ride we've ever had in Malta, until the airports open up, people feel safe to travel, and people have the money to travel. And all the four I've taken part in over the past weeks, everything I've read over the past weeks, the forecasts are all looking at 18 months, 24 months before we come back to sort of 2019 numbers of some sort. I don't have a crystal ball. Hopefully it will be much shorter than that. But we have to wait and see. And I think the sensible thing is to batten down the hatches and to prepare for a longer drawn out crisis, rather than just hope for the best and try and be sort of unrealistic and hope that this is all going to come back to normal within 2 or 3 months' time. I don't think that's realistic.
One debate I've been having with some people is the Airbnbs of this world, for instance. So Airbnb had a major impact in the hotel industry post-financial crisis. But so the view of some people is there is greater peace of mind in people's minds in terms of cleanliness and standards with the brands, for instance, and proper hotels. So there could actually be a positive upside for the hotel industry in that regard. Do you agree, or what are you saying?
Well, quite potentially. If you look at the Maltese market, which we talked about before, up to a few years ago, 95% of people that came to Malta stayed in hotels and hotel type accommodation. If you take last year, nearly 50% stayed in non-hotel accommodation, which is typically your Airbnb style of accommodation. So To use the extreme argument, if everyone chose to stay in a hotel and tourism fell by half, hotels could be still in the same position that they were. Again, not realistic. I'm taking an extreme scenario to explain the point. There has been a lot of talk about brands being more trusted, maybe even smaller hotels being more trusted to follow cleaning, hygiene protocols, etc. I think it's going to depend very much on the individual uh, service provider. I think there will be hotels that do this extremely well and communicate it extremely well to their potential guests. And I think there will be individual homeowners who put their homes out or apartments out for Airbnb, who will also do a good job and promote it well. And likewise, there will be others who fail miserably, either because they don't have the knowledge or the skill or the time or the resources to implement the type of hygiene protocols that we expect going forward. I've seen now probably half a dozen different protocols from the big chains that I work with or I'm close to. They are extensive and they are going to come at a cost. And there will be some people who try and cut corners, I think, at their own peril. I think health, hygiene, safety are going to be top of people's lists. They want to know that the room has been cleaned very, very thoroughly and sanitized thoroughly, a bathroom, a table in a restaurant, whatever contact point they come in contact with, they want to be at least have their mind at rest that that's been sanitized properly. And if brands or individual outlets like Airbnb can't promote and guarantee that kind of scenario, I think people will vote with where they stay. And even if it's at the expense of a higher price, a higher rate, I think people will pay it if they are reassured that where they're staying is safer than other potential places.
So peace of mind, trust. I think trust is the currency of the future. And how do you figure out if a brand is truly trustworthy or it's just greenwashing? There are a million and one other questions. I know you're pressed for time. From an investment perspective, I would think that anything that helps hotels be more efficient, reduce their costs in terms of water, power, increase efficiency and transparency on cleaning, they would be interesting adjacent areas to invest in, perhaps?
I mean, if I take the sustainability side, in our hotels in Malta, we tended to operate on a high level of sustainability, producing our own water through our own plants, the type of glazing, shading systems, etc., etc. There were loads of things we would do. What I found was, and we actually tested this a few years ago, that if your price and your rates are slightly higher and you try and explain it's because you're trying to be more sustainable, people aren't prepared to pay the price. So what we found was that hotel guests are happy to stay in a hotel that is more sustainable on top of a hotel which is less sustainable, as long as the price is the same. The moment it's more expensive, becomes a different kind of decision. I'm generalizing, and this is not everyone, and the environmentally aware and the environment sort of fighters in this world would be prepared to pay a bit more, but not everyone. It's just definitely, from our experience, wasn't the general rule. However, I still think it should be done. And within the hotel side, it's a bit of a two-edged sword, because you can be environmental and save cost at the same time. So just to give an example, when we were producing our own water, we were producing it at a third of the cost of what we would buy it off the grid for. So there was a 5 to 6 year payback on the equipment we installed in order to to do that. The same with solar power and other types of technology. So it could be a win-win both for the environment and your cost line and P&L from within the hotel point of view. So for suppliers promoting things that help hotels, technology that help hotels be more sustainable, if they can come up with especially cost-effective solutions, then this would make a lot of sense. The classic at the moment is the little sort of guest supplies, shampoos, soaps, etc., and these little one-use plastics. If someone can come up with a really good solution there, which is hygienic, cost-effective, environmentally friendly, they're on for a big winner at the moment, I think.
But sustainability is, I mean, cash is green as well, right? So in thinking green, you've got to think of always the profit, because otherwise it's not sustainable. It's actually irresponsible. So
yeah, green solutions, which are also cost effective for hotels, will be taken up very easily. I mean, I'm stating the obvious, but very often we're approached and businesses are sometimes expected to just take on something just for the sake that it is sustainable from an environmental point of view. The reality is it has to be sustainable from a financial point of view as well to be attractive, and that needs to be taken into consideration.
For sure, and we have that debate a lot in the fashion circles. And although the research says that more people want products that are ethical and sustainable, I push back and say ultimately people buy what is convenient, cool, and cost effective. So unless you're hitting those two factors, then you can forget it. You've been very generous with your time. Are there any parting words you'd like to leave us with?
I think at the moment we're in times where we have a big opportunity to become more human, more humane, more kind, have more time for each other. Yes, we have to focus on the business. We have to take some tough decisions, decisive decisions, but that doesn't mean we lose our humanity in doing it. So hopefully there is a positive aspect to this virus and this situation, which will help human beings become closer, hopefully.
Phenomenal. Wonderful. Winston, thank you very, very much. It's lovely to see you, and I'm really glad.
Likewise.
Doing well. God bless. My best to the family, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Likewise. Thanks, Deborah.